my machine is localhost. So on your setup, you may have your thin point somewhere else on the network. You need to put the IP address of the EMS server in here. And then for the port, well, the EMS server I'm using is the developer edition. It's on port 8080 and it's HTTP protocol. Then for the edge service, I need to make sure that the provider is bound because the edge service is going to advertise itself as being available through this provider. One property which we can't change but is published and looks like it needs to be set is the listener service. And this is published for various runtime typing reasons, but we can't actually set this here. We're going to make use of this in code. We also need to set our module name. So I'm going to call this EMS endpoint, and that's what we're going to register our edge service as. Okay, so now we set these properties up, let's see what we can do with these components. The first thing I'm going to do is use the EMS provider to make sure I can do a handshake with my EMS server. So I'm going to go ahead and drop a button on my form here, and I'm going to set the text property to handshake. What this means is that I should be able to do a test call for the service to make sure that it's there. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to call EMS provider handshake, and then I'm going to put in an anonymous method, and the prototype is procedure. What was it? It's a constant JSON object. So effectively, the handshake, when it returns, will call our anonymous method and pass in a JSON object. And all I want to do with that object is show message, and I'm going to say to JSON format this object as a pretty string for me, and I'll pass in a hash. Okay, now in order to use that, I'm going to need to put in system.json, and I'm also going to need rest.json in this unit. Okay, let's go ahead and run that application. And there are errors. What did I get wrong? System.json is redeclared. Okay, that's already in there, so I don't need to have it. Okay, so with my EMS server running in the background, let's go ahead and pull that up for you. I'm going to go ahead and hit handshake, and you can see that I got the version of the EMS data come back. Okay, good. So that means that our thin point is able to see the EMS server across the network. So the next thing we want to do is register this thin point so that the EMS server knows about it. So first things first, I'm going to look in my EMS management console and make sure that I'm connected, do a refresh under modules, and there is nothing registered. We need to get our thin point registered in here. Okay, the way we do that is I'm going to put a new button on my form, and I'm going to set the text to register. And then I'm going to save myself a little typing here and copy paste some code in. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use the EMS edge service and set its listening protocol. Now, in terms of the listening protocol for HTTP, you remember that property that I said we couldn't set? Well, that's because the property has been created for us. It's this EMS edge service 1 listener service. And this listener service is basically a pluggable protocol handler. And so I'm going to cast it as a custom EMS edge HTTP listener. That's because I'm using the HTTP protocol. And I'm going to set the host address to localhost. Now that actually, on this occasion, this is not the host address of the EMS server. This is the host address of the thin point. So again, if your thin point is up on the network somewhere, put a suitable IP address or host name in there so the EMS server knows where to go look when it's looking for the thin point. And the same thing is true with the port number. I'm using 8082 because my EMS server is on the same machine as my thin point, and it's already using port 8080 and 8081. So I just go to the next available. And then I'm going to go ahead and call register module. So that's going to register this module with the EMS console. Let's go ahead and give that a test. And I've got some errors because I need a user support that, which is this EMS hosted HTTP listener. Okay. So I'll go ahead and bring my EMS console back. I'm going to test my handshake again, we're all good. I hit register, and if I do a refresh over here, I get EMS endpoint, and it's showing me that it's registered. Most importantly, this EMS server, you'll notice, localhost 8082 is where my endpoint is at. Now, if you want some feedback when your EMS edge service is registered, we have the events on registered, and we also have on unregistered, so you can go put messages or log messages, what have you, in there. I don't need to do that, I've just registered my module. So the third thing that we need to do with our endpoint is add a resource to it. Now, first thing I'm going to do is add in a special unit here, which I'm going to come back to, and this is EMS resource types. And I'm going to come back and show you why this is added in. In fact, I'm going to punish it out so that I can show you what the problem is if you don't remember to include that. So remember that there, put a pin in it, we're going to come back in a moment. What I need to do now is build up a class which represents the resource that I'm going to be publishing. Again, I'm going to copy paste this because I don't really feel like typing it, and this is my test. So if I type in a key resource, and it is publishing a get method. And this get method should look relatively familiar. Ignoring the context property for the moment, we have a request and a response. So as you saw when we built an endpoint earlier, it's a request-response system. This is how REST works. So what we need to do is look at the request, decide what the EMS server is asking us to do, and provide the appropriate response when we build a handler for this method. Now these parameters are going to be passed in by the endpoint edgeware code, so we don't need to worry about passing them, maybe we just need to handle them. You also notice that I have method info on, method info off. Effectively, I want to make sure that there is runtime type information for the TMyResource class, because in order to publish this, the EMS software is going to go off and look at the runtime type information. And I don't want this resource to be registered as the TMyResource. I would give it a more friendly name. So I put this attribute resource name and I'm calling it joystick. And that's because this is going to return the data from our Arduino joystick eventually. Currently I'm using +m, it's just another directive to ensure the runtime type information is produced as needed. Now with this class, I need to implement the get method. So let's go ahead and start the implementation here. Again, let's save some typing. I'm going to go ahead and do some copy pasting here. And let's look at what we have. So, our result data, I'm just creating a result type of JSON object. So I'm going to create an instance of that object, and then I'm going to add two pairs, so two properties to the object, x-axis and y-axis. Again, we're going to be getting data from our joystick components, so I'm going to pass them out as the x-axis and the y-axis values. And then I'm just passing in some dummy values right now of 10 and 20. And finally, this is the bit where I'm sending my response. So just as we did with the endpoint, a response type offset value, I'm passing in a JSON object to be encoded, and I'm saying true. That means that the pinpoint code is going to take ownership of this object. We don't have to create it, that's already handled for us. And the final thing I need to do is now that we have our resource, I'm going to go ahead and set up initialization stations. And then here what I need to do is register resource, type info of TMyResource. So what that's going to do is that the initialization of the unit is going to go and look at TMyResource. It's going to use all the runtime type information and this attribute to name it, and then it's going to publish that as one of the available service options for the component. Okay. The next thing we need to do is to set our endpoint to active, or our endpoint to active. By doing so, the EMS server will be able to call it. So let's go ahead and grab a button, and we'll set this to activate. And one more time, I'm going to do some copy pasting here. I'm actually going to set two things to active. So the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that the X service itself is active, and then I'm going to make sure that the listening service, so its server component, is also set to active true. Now before I've done this, I'm going to go back to my EMS management console, and I'm going to manually delete the one that I've already registered. The reason is, I'm going to have to register again, because when I registered the first time, we didn't have our resource in there, and so as far as EMS is concerned, this endpoint doesn't have any resources. So rather than build the unregistered code, I'm going to go ahead and use the console to delete that out. So let's go ahead and run this code again, and I'm going to show you the deliberate mistake, or actually here's a non-deliberate mistake, so this is including EMS resource API. And that gives us types of the endpoint context, the endpoint request, and so on. So okay, let's go ahead and run this. Excellent, it linked. So I should still be able to do my handshake, but when I try to register, I should have a fault. Okay, so what's going on here? Well, the code that's necessary to register the runtime type information is actually inside of EMS resource types. Now, the application will still build and run without this users included, but as you've just seen, it will crash when you try to register the resource. Make sure you have this unit users and you won't get that error. So let's go ahead and try again. I'm going to go ahead and register, and this time it's successfully registered. So if I take a look back in the management console and do a refresh, we can see EMS pinpoint has been registered. Okay, so we have our pinpoint registered. The next step is going to be to activate it. So I click on activate, and our pinpoint is now enabled so our EMS server can see it. And so we can go and access its data. I'm going to bring the browser here. Let's see what happens with a buffer. Okay, so I've gone ahead and called our endpoint, our pinpoint, and I've got back x-axis and y-axis. So let's take a look at the URL here. We're calling localhost 8080. That isn't the pinpoint itself, that's actually the EMS server. We're then asking for the EMS server's registered edge modules, and looking at our EMS pinpoint, and we're requesting its joystick proxy. So what's happening is when we call for the registered edge module, it's going to go and find our EMS pinpoint, and it's opening a connection to it. It then requests the joystick data and sends that back to us. So effectively the EMS server is the proxy of the pinpoint. The important part about that is you can have multiple pinpoints across your network. So if you have let's say a factory floor with a number of Bluetooth tracking beacons, well, Bluetooth doesn't have a very long range, but you can have multiple pinpoints within range of each of them. So this will give you the ability to collect their data and make that all available as a central location in your EMS server. Let's take a look now at how we modify this pinpoint to collect the actual data from our joystick sensor. Okay, so we now have our pinpoints actually seen and working. So let's go ahead and modify this pinpoint to use actual data from the joystick. I have the joystick plugged in, and you've seen the code to build this data from the joystick before. But I'm just going to run through it real quick one more time. So let's grab a COM port component and put that on form. On this page, we'll make sure that that is set to COM port 3. Okay, and we'll have a unpackaged component, and then we're going to bind to COM port shortly. Then we're going to have a generic real value, and I need two of those. So we've got two generic real values. And then in the code itself, actually it's gone through the wiring up first. So the COM port I'm going to feed into the unpackaged. The unpackaged needs to have some elements to decode the data that it's getting. So I'm going to go ahead and use two binary floats. and there's the binary boolean coming from the joystick button as well. We're not using it in this application, but we need to make sure that it's in there. And I'm going to go ahead and bind up the float to the reel. So that's out. And then if we switch back to the designer, we come here and set the on-process data and for generic reel C21 first. And what I'm going to do here, I'm going to use a couple of just user global variables. So I'm going to have x-axis is a reel and y-axis is also a reel. Now obviously you can put this data anywhere you like. I'm only going to be grabbing the most recent value from the joystick into these two variables. If you were reading data from a sensor, you could of course cache that data, and when the EMS server calls the thing point can respond by setting all of the data up or all of the data sync to the max fetch or what have you. We're just going to cache the latest value right here, x and y. So I'm getting my event handler. Let's say that the x-axis is equal to the out value, the most recent out value from the controller. Let's take a copy of that because we're going to do the same thing again but for the y-axis. So we have the x and y values, and then down here in our get method, instead of passing in a JSON number, this time I'm going to change this to a close struct x-axis and generate my own value, and then I'm also going to pass in a close struct on the y-axis. Okay, so that's our module. Let's go ahead and build and run it. Okay, so I go ahead and activate, and that's activating my module. And now if I pull up our web browser here, and paste in our address, we can go off and take a look at the joystick reads. So there we have the joystick data coming back out, and I can go ahead and refresh this while moving the controller, and you can see that I'm altering the x and y axis values. Okay, so our date point is working. In the next part tomorrow, we're going to take a look at how to document the endpoint that we built using YAML, and we'll also look at how YAML is used to document the endpoint that we just built. YAML is a documentation format which we can then hand over to, say, a web developer or a .NET developer and have them access our services from their own preferred language. So we'll take a look at some examples of how we do that using JavaScript and C# tomorrow. Thanks for watching. My name is Craig Hammond.
In the immune response and chronic immune-based conditions of diseases. It's an area of nutritional science that expands rapidly every week as we learn more and more about a variety of sources of inflammation that are in constant communication with our physiology. So with that being said, I want to get going as soon as possible. We have a lot of ground to cover. By now, I'm sure that many of you have had at least some exposure to clinical papers or to other sources of scientific information regarding the role that the microbiome or the GI environment plays in governing inflammation. That's certainly going to be the predominant source of inflammation for the human body. Of course, there are other sources, whether we talk about the role of acute chronic injury or infection, is certainly playing pivotal roles in the inflammatory response and how that inflammatory response is interpreted by the immune system. But really, the gut plays such a pivotal role for many reasons. And the primary reasons are that you have this enormously complex ecosystem there with anywhere from 300 to, in a very diverse intestinal environment, 1,200 maybe species of gram-negative and gram-positive bacteria, plus eukaryotic species such as fungi. Or yeast and viruses, in some cases, parasites that make up this microbiome. And that mix of species has enormous influence on what happens at the gut lining. Then you also have, of course, the importance of particular components of our diet that may either feed families of bacteria, feeding one more than others. You will have other dietary components that may be additives to food, chemicals, agrochemicals that are used in the growing of food, and then other substances that may be produced during food process that are seen. And all of these create incredibly large number of moving parts that can influence that intestinal lining and all of the different receptors that lie in close proximity to that intestinal lining that can pick up on either potential threats or multiple sources of inflammation. Now, it's really important to note that a large percentage of our immune system, in some cases, depending on the individual, but in some cases, 3/4 to 75% of the immune system lies within just a couple centimeters of the intestinal lining. That's really important when we think about all the different ways that diet and that microbiome can influence the immune system's activity and consequently inflammation. Another important aspect to note is that a high concentration of particular families of leukocytes, for instance, eosinophils, which can have very aggressive defense behavior patterns when it is interpreted with a blood presence, they're also right there in that front line. And then, to build upon this, the intestinal lining, just as a kind of an overview, is over the course of human evolution, it has been given a variety of gateway or portal type of regulatory exposures to what's in the GI, meaning that at times these windows will open and allow our immune system to have some short windows of exposure to potential pathogens or pathogens for that matter, and other possible threats that the immune system will have to produce antibodies to for later defense against. And that's a big part of this mechanism for immune programming that over the course of human evolution really evolved to have acute exposures, not chronic exposures to particular aspects of our diet or particular species of microbes. Now, again, as an overview of all of this, chronic and sometimes acutely intense stimulation of particular families of leukocytes that are there at that intestinal lining can generate an overly aggressive immune response or an immune-based cascade of events that ultimately contribute to the pathology of one or more tissue types. That would be connective tissue, nervous tissue. Now, there are countless examples of that we'll take a look at in a moment. But there are really the leading causes of diet-based, food-based inflammation. I had to narrow down to the 5 most common sources. First would be dysbiosis. I feel like there is an overwhelming body of clinical evidence now showing very strong relationships, in some cases cause and effect relationships between particular pathogenic bacteria, families of bacteria, imbalances, and inflammation or autoimmune conditions. Then there are also a significant number of papers, which this is put on the novel information for clinicians that show the damaging effects of lectins found in a wide variety of plants, most notably legumes and certain grains, that damage the gut lining and really increase permeability. Then there are, of course, non-compatible proteins, which are in the headlines daily, and most people are now familiar with the damage that casein or gliadin or something like soy protein has been shown to cause. And researchers have found out various mechanisms between these less compatible proteins, whether or not our immune system is interpreting them as a foreign invader, Western circulation, whether it's the role of something like gliadin, which is the most common type of protein, in stimulating globulin production and thereby increasing intestinal permeability. There's a wide variety of mechanisms that can explain the inflammatory effects of these less compatible or non-compatible proteins, but they're something that most of us have had a certain amount of exposure to. Then there are the roles of less naturally occurring and more either synthesized or food processing generated compounds. These would be 2 major categories. We have advanced glycosylated end products, sometimes referred to as age molecules, these are produced in high-heat cooking, and then you have a variety of artificial ingredients and chemicals, some of which are used in clinical trials when they want to generate high levels of intestinal permeability with the animal model to actually use specific additives or emulsifiers that are used in the food supply, which is really, it's really hard when you start to think about, that paradox that we're using it in the food supply for a particular aspect of food science, and yet we're also using it in animal models to generate an accelerated level of GI pathology. So these would be the 5 most common sources of dietary-based inflammation. But again, dysbiosis should be at the top of the list, primarily because it can go in so many different directions. Now, in the past month or so, there have been a handful of papers. I put these references at the bottom of this slide if you want to look at these more closely, that have been looked at by many gastroenterologists, immunologists, registered dietitians, and a variety of host clinicians as major breakthroughs. And they're really just, I would say, more recent affirmations of prior research which has shown very, very similar results, but in different models or different time frames. What these last couple of interventions or trials have shown is that there are at least 4 different ways in which dietary modifications can influence immune function, autoimmunity, and overall levels of chronic inflammation. Those would be dietary restrictions and or fasting, which are shown to stop a deteriorating immune system and actually improve the immune system's ability to recognize time to foes and to be more effective. Fasting has also been shown to promote a highly anti-inflammatory or systemic type of process throughout the body. Fasting has also been shown to alleviate, in some cases reverse, autoimmune diseases. And a restricted diet with respect to eliminating lectins, eliminating those dietary sources of less compatible proteins, which we just talked about in this previous slide. Whether we want to call that a specific carbohydrate diet, a more paleo diet, a gluten, dairy, soy-free diet, there are a lot of different ways in which we could look at that particular dietary intervention. But overall, these dietary restrictions have been shown to significantly improve outcomes with ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. And at that most recent trial, which was directed by Dr. David Susskind at Seattle Children's Hospital, in a very short period of time, children with ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease had all symptoms mitigated or basically were put into remission with this carbohydrate-specific diet. So these are, for some of us, these are really eye-opening revelations that, we may have had in the last month or two, but these are just added to a growing body of clinical evidence that dietary restriction and or dietary elimination